Welcome to Meet the Author at Marines Memorial Club. As part of the Marines Memorial's mission to honor the legacy of military service through our living memorial and programs that commemorate, educate, and serve, we are excited to bring you the virtual version of this popular program that usually takes place at our club in San Francisco. In this edition, President and CEO Lieutenant General Mike Rocco talks with our featured author, Colonel Lawrence Colby. An aviator with the call sign Cheese, Colonel Colby served for 28 years between the Marine Corps and the Air Force. He is the author of the Ford Stevens Military-Aviation thriller series. Enjoy.
Well, Cheese, thanks. And again, let me just start by saying really thank you for taking the time to be here for this. Very proud of what you do. As you know, after I retired, I'm now President and CEO of the Marines Memorial Association up here in San Francisco. We're a veterans nonprofit that educates, serves, and commemorates the veteran and active duty community. And I really do appreciate you spending the time with us here. So if you could please provide an introduction.
Sir, I'm a proud member. I've been a member for about 20 years, so it's good to be with you. Thank you. Throughout the world, your organization brings smiles every time I go into a club or restaurant and mention that I'm a member in San Francisco. So it's always good to be part of the team.
Really do appreciate it. And again, total truth in advertising. Cheese and I have known each other for many, many years. We're both Cobra pilots in our former lives. Perhaps not having as much fun as we did when we were flying Cobras, but still enjoying life and really both continuing to serve in various capacities. And I know, Cheese, you went on to now you're a proud author, and I look forward to talking to you about that. But let me just ask you again, what started you in the military?
Sure. So my dad was in the New York National Guard throughout his time as a New York City firefighter. I grew up in Massapequa, Long Island, and it was just a call to serve in uniform. And with his influence and a neighbor who flew OV-10 Broncos as a young kid, I was always attracted to military aviation, and then through the influence of a neighbor, brought me into the Marine Aviation Circle. And as an undergraduate at Niagara University, a fellow Vincentian school to your St. John's, I wound up enrolling in PLC, platoon leaders, juniors and seniors. And then that was my opening to Marine Corps and Marine Corps Aviation, a path. And 28 years later, between the Marine Corps and the Air Force Reserve, here with a smile.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you what, to your dad and to your family, thanks for raising the kind of child that would want to
thank you.
volunteer and serve in the nation. And from your dad's perspective, being a fellow New Yorker, and not that the fire department, the New York Fire Department, needed anything, but they certainly became world respected throughout the world after their response to 9/11. And I mean, even until this day, I mean, you walk around and you talk to just about anybody, they all know about the fire department. So thanks again to your family and your dad, particularly for his service to that great city and to a calling that is over and above.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So now to your military career. So just again, we talked about it briefly, but how did you get to fly that venerable, world-renowned AH-1 attack helicopter?
Oh boy, we have great roots together. So after flight school, I was very lucky to get West Coast Cobras. And so many of your viewers probably know it's a super competitive process when you go through Navy pilot training as a Marine officer. Super lucky to get that aircraft. And I passed HMT 303 training, which is our training squadron out on the West Coast, and assigned to a squadron, HMLA 369, the gunfighters.
Can we do it just a special for the crowd?
So there we go. Gunfighters rule.
Absolutely.
Terrific squadron. And if I had to put a date on it, it was fall of 1996. And I was a first lieutenant. I believe you might have been a young major at the time, reporting aboard to fly the aircraft. And boy, you hold on for the ride. And if any of the viewers may not know what it's like, but it's a total absorption of information on how to fly the aircraft on a tactical employment in Southern California and other areas of the United States. And I'd say the two deployments that I went on with 369, one was the 31st MEU, and the second one was a UDP, or Unit Deployment Program, out of Okinawa. Phenomenal years, about 5 years, I believe. And all good times, great friends.
Absolutely, friends for life. And
yes,
and for those people watching, when Cheese and I did this, that's the well-known gunfighter salute for those special folks. So back to your military career, do you have any special memory, any particular thing that stands out most in your military, in your flying career?
I do. So I'll go, one was an obstacle I had to overcome, but I wanted to emphasize what I remember most is the bond and the trust among other gunfighters. And it didn't matter what rank. While we might have busted each other's chops and held people accountable, there was always the love of a fellow Marine and taking care of others. I always felt it. No matter where I went in the world, there's always a love of the fellow Marine. And that has stuck with me throughout my entire life, from the day I was in the Marine Corps, even in retirement. That's number one. The second thing is an obstacle, which you were part of, is my challenges with vision. Of all body parts to not work well for a pilot, it's very disappointing to have a pilot that can't pass the vision test. And for the viewers who may not know, you take an annual flight physical. I had failed a vision portion, and I was not allowed to fly temporarily for about 6 months. And that was a challenging time, because we spend years academically in the books, years training, and it was something I had to sit on the sidelines and wait for a medical evaluation before I could get in the cockpit again. And I did not say no, or I didn't let it go. I continually would go for additional evaluations and write letters and fight the process, and overcame it. And then my very first flight was with you, night vision goggles, out at 29 Palms. So that's pretty memorable.
Yeah, and I'm glad, because I was going to bring that up, and I'm glad you did. But really, for the viewers, there are a couple of key points to really foot stomp is not giving up. And Cheese mentioned that about not giving up, and extremely demanding environment, physically challenging, and again, to have a problem with your eyes, not to give up, never gave up, and kept with it. And I do remember that flight at 29 Palms out to Amboy Crater, and on night vision goggles in probably one of the most demanding environments, and you just absolutely crush it. Never would have thought you were out of the cockpit for 6 months. So well done. And if you go, if you go beyond, you mentioned in our pre-talk there about some of the other outside of the flying. You mentioned your tour in the Pentagon. Can you hit on that real quick?
Sure. So this is what I would consider an interesting story, which brings credibility to my books. And so, as you know, many Marine officers who are in the cockpit have to come out of the cockpit and do a ground tour. And so I was assigned to Officer Candidate School at Quantico. And I was their one pilot on permanent staff, which is a unique position among all the other Marines who don't fly. And I was there for about a year before I was nominated against my will to be an aide-de-camp for a 2-star, the Deputy Commanding General of Combat Development Command. And I didn't want to do it because I was a captain and I wanted to return to the cockpit at that moment. And the colonel at OCS, at Officer Candidate School, said, "You're going to do it and it'll change your life." And I didn't understand that at the time. And it changed my life. I actually became an aide-de-camp to a 2-star, and I learned a tremendous amount about both Quantico, the Marine Corps, operational into strategic, and the Pentagon. We had an office at the Pentagon, and that was my introduction just after 9/11 to the building and politics. and not necessarily Republican or Democrat, but the back office kind among the services and OSD, or the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And again, I held on for the ride on the back of that tail while we went at Mach 1 on a variety of different strategic subjects.
Well, once again, Cheese, our careers paralleled amazingly so, because I also, as a major, in fact, it was a little after we first met, but you remember I went down to Miramar and became the staff secretary for a 2-star, much
Yes,
against
sir.
my will. But the education that I received during that tour
Yeah.
was invaluable. And as you say, and this is a great segue into my next question, but you realize in the Pentagon, people have a fascination with that building, and rightfully so, what goes on there. And having, fortunately or unfortunately, spent a lot of time as a senior Marine officer in that building, it really has, as you said, where you wanted to go and fly, this was the right time, the right calling at the right time to go into the Pentagon, and it helped you. I think you alluded to it with your books. So if you could really kind of stress what was as you moved out of aviation and into writing, what was the motivation there?
Sure. So I've always written magazine articles and had them published, or I would take down notes about a variety of different things, usually funny. Things that went on in the squadrons were hysterical to us because we experienced them.
Sure.
Well, if I combine that aviation experience with the Washington experiences that we had, along with the death of a pilot that I knew, he was misdiagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And if I combine all those on a Venn diagram, I said, wow, I wonder if I have a story here. And I got up every day at 4 a.m. and I wrote 1 to 2 pages. And a year later, I had a 500-page novel on my hands. And so I figured, wow, this book might go well, it might publish. And I went through the editing process. I went through the pre-publication release at the Pentagon through public affairs, which we could chat about. That's a pretty significant obstacle. And then I published through Amazon, and through the Veteran Network, it took off. And I was so grateful and so lucky to have that book take off that while I was publicizing the first one, I wrote a second one through the same process. And while we'll get into some of the details, I think the authenticity of our backgrounds provides the real nuggets, the real meat and potatoes that the readers enjoy, because when I compare myself to other authentic military thriller writers, we've worn the cloth. We've worn the flight suit, and that makes it real. And also, I probably add in that my characters, while fictional, always involve some real aspect of guys and girls in the squadrons. And I'll protect the guilty by changing the names, but they're in there.
Well, I did read through both of your books, and I didn't notice any bad fingers, so that may be a good thing. But so you mentioned about how when you first started, you would get up and you'd write 1 to 2 pages, and you eventually put the whole book together, and as you said, you had it published and you're off and running. So what is your schedule now that you are a published and successful author? What is your schedule now?
So I haven't changed anything. I found that it works for me. I'm a morning guy. I think most of us in the squadrons probably are morning people, because we've had to get up our entire lives early. So I kept with it after I retired in 2018. And so my process, besides working out and trying to get the normal 8 hours of sleep, what I try to do is type out what I'm watching, being an observer of the human condition. What I mean is, if I see folks running or walking down the street, or I'm at the terminal and I see people at the airport and something catches my eye, that's pretty unique. For example, I have a character who wears red wrestling shoes to every event. Everywhere he goes, that's what he does. He's going to make a book. He's making my book. He's a character. Someone might have an accent or a mannerism with their hair. And so I'll merge that all together and make them a character. And so my process is to write a rough outline, I don't make it very detailed. And I've lifted that from David Baldacci, who's a very famous author, and I'll use that as my guide. And sometimes you never know where the scene will go. And not to sound geeky, but sometimes I'll write only one page. If I've got the time, sometimes I'll go 10 pages because that's where the story takes me.
Do your books appeal? Do you envision yourself, going out and using it as I'm a young teenager in high school. I read your book and go, boy, I want to be a part of that gun club. Or is it more of I've been a part of an organization like that?
So, sir, I can track my metrics pretty well. Mm-hmm. And I had written it without any, for lack of a better term, dirt. My books are pretty clean. And so I don't have any drastic scenes in it that would make our mothers embarrassed, right? And so by being a little bit vanilla, my audience is a little bit wider. And so I've had books read by high school students used in book reports, but predominantly I'm catering to the 25 to 55 group, 50% male, 50% female. Okay. And although the veterans love it, I actually get a lot more non-veterans. But I'll also share with you in the audience that veterans are not shy about voicing their opinion. And so if I get a statistic wrong, I hear about it. And so I'm very sensitive to making sure that it's right, because I'll get an email from somebody or a post that says, geez, you messed up on the so-and-so topic.
No kidding. Yeah. Now you mentioned it before, and I'll come back to that now. In the clearing your publications through the books through the White House, through their public affairs. Can you just kind of expand on that a little bit? And is it, I know probably from a classified, there's a classified version, they want to make sure there's nothing in there.
Yes.
But I'd imagine all the editing and wordsmithing is probably done through your publisher. But how much of that, just kind of how that process goes?
Sure. So I personally go through about 10 edits on my own. I'll revise a book after writing it. It takes me about a year to write. I'll go through it 10 times. Then I give it to the editor, and then they chop it up. Then it goes to a specific office at the Pentagon that not many folks know about. It's in Office of the Secretary of Defense, OSD, Public Affairs. There's an entire shop there dedicated to veteran writers. And they review screenplays for the Hollywood motion picture industry. They review articles, and they review books. And anybody with a clearance, TS, SCI, or higher, we signed a non-disclosure agreement. And in that NDA states specifically that you'll have your published works cleared. Now, the first book that I wrote took maybe 6 months, if I remember correctly, to go through and edit. No big deal. The second book is where I have a little bit of heartache. 17 months to review. 17 months, every page was criticized. And here's the reason. It involves cyber. And I know we haven't gotten into titles of books, but the second book involves cyber espionage and hijacking an airplane remotely. And if you think through it for a second, the flight decks are all electronic, glass cockpits. And I read a Homeland Security report about someone breaking in through the airplane's Wi-Fi and manipulating the flight controls. And I said, wow, that's a story. But you can imagine the Pentagon wanting to know where my sources were, what I was writing about, and they go through every page. And I say I've got some heartache with it. I obey it. I'm not going to fight that system. Although I'm a fighter, I do obey it, because you certainly don't want to disclose anything that shouldn't be disclosed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And again, not for public concern, but you're absolutely right. That is almost too close to home on that topic.
Yeah.
Any idea on follow-throughs on books with movie deals or?
Yeah, so I wound up getting together with a friend in Buffalo, New York, who referred me to a gentleman out in Los Angeles who's a screenplay writer. Mm-hmm. And we put together a 4-page summary of my first book, The Devil Dragon Pilot, and we pitched it around to Los Angeles, but it never caught on. And so now we're leaning towards going on the Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, Amazon route, and because you never know where something could turn up. I have a producer who's interested in, based out of Hawaii, but you never know. You never know what's going to happen. If there's anything I've learned, it's that I'm not in Los Angeles and I'm not a screenplay writer. So it's difficult from the East Coast, where I live in Washington, to really peddle my wares into that environment.
Sure.
So I'll let experts do it for me.
No, absolutely. And how many stories do we hear about hugely successful movies that just failed and failed and failed, to get started, and after the 20th, 30th, whatever it is, I just recently saw something with Kevin Costner, Dancing with Wolves. Just was turned down. Rocky, turned down.
Right.
All became Academy Award winners. So we expect to see you up there on the red carpet there.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah,
and you
that'd be great.
You can give you a gunfighter salute. So if you don't mind, can you ask, what are you working on now?
So my fourth book, you're going to laugh because this is something you can't make up. It's about a bad apple, dirty general at the Pentagon who gets...
No, say it isn't so.
He gets kidnapped in broad daylight, right out of the Pentagon. No one sees anything. And there's heavy FBI involvement because once he disappeared, there was a gigantic theft of classified information related to drone technology. And so the story takes place certainly at the Pentagon in Northern Virginia through Gettysburg. And again, I'm leveraging some of my authentic background into that world of general flag officers and secretaries.
Well, that's what we look forward to it, but I guess we're probably at least 17 months away from that being
That's right.
cleared for any of us to read. Well, that's wonderful, Cheese.
Thanks.
And again, it's really, but how close are you for putting that in for publication?
I'm about halfway through.
Okay.
I really didn't give any background, but I'd be happy to share on the homework portion. I pride myself in really digging into the topics. I'll actually call up or cold call locations. I'll interview folks, specifically FBI agents, on how they would handle a national security incident like this. I don't want to give away too much, but I have an incident with Arlington County here in Virginia with the fire department. And so they were very open to speaking about the firehouses in and around the Pentagon, not related to any one single event, but just how they conduct operations here in Northern Virginia. And by getting some of the nomenclature, some of the ranks, what would happen if they had to make a radio call between dispatch and the fire trucks. I give that type of detail when I do the research, and I put it right in the book.
That is absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to actually read it. But really
thank you. Thank you. It's called Objective Area, so figure about a year out.
About a year out.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, again, I hope, geez, I can't thank you enough. And to our members here and to the viewers, hopefully we've introduced a new author who has got just a fascinating background. And unlike many of the others who write about military topics and security issues, as Larry Colby talked about, or Cheese talked about, he's got the background and the expertise to go along with it. So I can't thank you enough. Anything you'd like to share with us before we sign off?
I am grateful for the opportunity we could spend together. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your time and your invite. Thank you, sir.
No, absolutely, Cheese. And again, I can't hugely proud of everything you've done. You've served for many, many years, and you continue to serve and continue to inform the public. And it sounds to me it's just a fascinating world that you are now in. And I can only hope that somebody like Tom Hanks picks up a script and says, yeah, I want to do some of that. I want some of Cheese.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Well, thanks again. Best of luck to you and hope to see you at the club.
Thank you. See you soon, sir.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation from Marines Memorial Association and Foundation. To learn more about the organization, visit marinesmemorial.org. To make a donation to support programs that honor the legacy of military service, Visit ourmission.marinesmemorial.org.